Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's FPL Yusuf and welcome back to my channel. Today we're back with a Game Week 27 wildcard draft video, but what we're also going to be doing is talking about strategy for the upcoming double in Game Week 28 and the blank in Game Week 29. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. Okay, so today this video is going to be mainly talking about a Game Week 27 wildcard draft, the types of players that we should be looking at for the upcoming blank and double, but also beyond Game Week 30 as well, as some players are going to have some good fixtures. But just quickly, before we get into that, I just want to start off by looking at blank Game Week 29. So we're going to do like a little bit of a strategy talk here. As you guys can see on screen, there's only actually going to be 4 games being played in Game Week 29. So 8 teams are playing. We obviously found out the FA Cup results last night. We found out who was going to be available for 29, which has been like long-awaited news for a lot of us. It kind of it's been hindering our transfers a little bit as we've been unsure as who's going to be playing, who's not. Now we have got confirmation. So yeah, I think it's going to make clarity a lot easier for a lot of us when it comes to making transfers over the next few weeks. I feel like for me personally as well with my team, when I wildcarded a few weeks back, I'd kind of invested in some teams that obviously at the time we already knew were going to be playing in 29, the Spurs, the Aston Villas of the world, but there was just the finer details that we were just kind of waiting on just to see if there was any upsets and see if anyone else would have been there by surprise. So yeah, let's just get straight into it. We're going to go through a whole wildcard draft. As I said before, it's going to be everything based around what's good for Game Week 27 this current week, but also 28 and 29 and beyond Game Week 30 as well. Okay, so let's start with the goalkeepers. So I won't go too much into detail with these two because goalkeepers, you kind of have them in there, hopefully to get a clean sheet with some save points as well, but there's not really too much to talk about with the goalkeepers. So we've gone with Neto starting off. He's got a very good game week this coming week in 27, which is against Burnley. And he's going to be coupled up with Flecken from Brentford. Now, these two rotate really well together. They're both very cheap. They're both 4.5 million. I think Neto might actually be 4.6 now, but they're both fairly cheap. They rotate really well with each other. Obviously, Neto has a double coming up in Game Week 28, whereas Flecken does play in Game Week 29. So you kind of got the best of both worlds. We get a good fixture for 27. We get Neto for his double game week in 28, Flecken for 29, and then Neto's got good fixtures all the way up until I think about 32, 33 after. So we've got two goalkeepers who kind of complement each other really well. So yeah, we're going to start off with Neto in goal for Bournemouth this week, and then it will be Flecken just for the 29, and then Neto will be back in throughout the rest of the games. Okay, so defenders. Who are we going to get in? Who's the most optimal for us to be using over the next few weeks? I want to start off by saying that Gabriel, let's start with him. Gabriel, as a player, I think you just don't get rid of him at all. He's so well priced at I think he's currently 5.2 million now, but I think a lot of us would have probably bought him in from 5 million and under. He's just someone that you just keep in there. Just keep him there. And even when Arsenal have like difficult fixtures or they blank in 29, the way this team's structured and set up is that you can just bench him and you can just keep rolling him through because Arsenal are the best defense in the league. They've got the best numbers. He is such a goal threat from set pieces. If I could have got Saliba in here, I would have, and maybe there's scope for that at some point where, as you can see, like there's a couple of other defenders in there, Van Dijk being the main one, that you could trade out with. But I just think Gabriel, for the price he is, for the goal threat he has, and for the way Arsenal defended this season, I think he's a no-brainer. I think if you haven't got him, go and get him. Don't be put off by, even if you're not free hit in 29, don't be put off by the fact that Arsenal will blank. As I said, this team's set up so that you can navigate through that without having to take a hit for him. So yeah, Gabriel is the first name and somebody who, to be honest with you, I think is you just keep him to the end of the season now. Second up, we just touched on him a minute ago, it's Virgil van Dijk. Now, this one's a little bit of an iffy one, which is why I say, if there was somebody else that you guys, saw or sort of were thinking about, I think Chelsea's a good example of that. They've got good fixtures coming up in Game Week 30. I haven't included any Chelsea players in here, but we will get onto Cole Palmer and such and why they're not in this team exactly. But you definitely could go for one of them. So Van Dijk has got a decent fixture away this week. He's against Nottingham Forest. I do expect Liverpool to keep a clean sheet in that game. But I don't think it'll be easy, but I do expect them to get through it. He obviously then plays City in 28, followed by a blank in 29. So the 2 weeks after that, you probably would be looking to bench him, if not move him on. The reason why I like Van Dijk is he's just such a set piece threat. Especially with the injuries Liverpool had, they're having to look elsewhere for goals, and he's scored in back-to-back games. Obviously, the Premier League when he had the double, he just scored the winner in the Carabao Cup final as well against Chelsea, ironically, from a corner. So I think he makes sense to me. He's going to be guaranteed for 90 minutes, regardless of who they're playing. And I think he's just Liverpool's best defender at the moment. Obviously you could look at someone like Conor Bradley. What happens when Trent comes back? Whereas Van Dijk doesn't have that issue. He's going to play every game. He's going to play 90 minutes so long as he's fit. And I think Liverpool's game weeks from 30 onwards, they've actually got very good fixtures. I know Sheffield United's in there, Brighton's in there, there's a few other teams. So yeah, Van Dijk for me is someone who you take him through 28 against City, you take him through 29 in the blank, and then you just use him from there on after, as Liverpool's fixtures will change. Okay, third up is Zabeni from Bournemouth. Now, this one is an interesting one. There was a lot of talk about Marco Senesi and whether or not you should get him. He worries me a lot. He is on 8 yellow cards currently, and obviously at this point, as soon as you get to 10 yellow cards, that's a 2-game suspension. Now, the chances of that happening in the next 2 games is obviously so small, but if he did get himself booked against Burnley this week, and then he got himself booked in the first double, he's going to then miss the second double, and it's just, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Especially if you're not wildcarding and you're just planning to bring him in for a hit, as I think I probably will be this week as well by bringing a Bournemouth defender in. There's a high chance of that. I just prefer Zabeni over Senesi, as I think he just offers... He's nowhere near the yellow card threshold, and for some reason he just seems to offer more minutes at the moment. Whenever Bournemouth are behind or they're trying to chase a game, Senesi seems to be the one that's sacrificed, and they'd throw on another midfielder. So I would just, for the sake of minutes and how good Bournemouth's fixtures are, I can see a couple of clean sheets for them coming up. I would rather have Zabeni in there and just guarantee that he's going to play the 19 minutes and have a start in the 11 as well. Okay, next up is the man who... he's been very disappointing for me so far, and that is Alfie Doherty. But I have hope. So he's obviously got a game against Aston Villa this week, which he will be on my bench for. He won't be starting. But next week, he obviously does play in the double, and he also plays in 29. So he's going to be very useful for these next 2 games. Now, anyone who's buying a Luton defender probably isn't expecting them to keep a clean sheet, whereas he offers a lot going forward. He offers a high attacking threat, and when he does usually get a return, he usually ends up with the bonus points. So for me, I think the upside of having him, especially because there's hardly any players to choose from in 29, the pool is so small, I think it makes sense to get him in now on a wild card so that you have him for the double and then you have him for 29. I think if you don't bring him in for the double, I don't know whether I'd say bring him in for 29, because I think most people will probably want to shift him out after that, as their fixtures take a little bit of a turn for the worst. And like I said, Luton at the best times aren't there really for the clean sheets. He's kind of just there solely because he's got a high assist threat. And the final defender we're going to talk about is Mickey van der Ven. Now, if Udogie was fit, I would try and get him. This team is all dependent on how your team value is. So for me, I still had 0.1 million left in the bank after making this team, which obviously wouldn't be enough to go from Van der Ven to Udogie. Now, there's obviously, as I said, there's things you could do, drop Van Dijk down to someone else. You could save, there's ways to save money in this team. However, I just think Van der Ven, 4.4 million. Spurs do play in 29. They've got a good run of fixtures coming up now as well, where they should start to get... I'm not expecting them to keep a clean sheet every game, but they should be getting more than what they have done. Also, he is enormous. I don't know if you've ever seen Van der Ven, but he's a giant. So from set pieces, he is a threat. And I think for the price that you're getting for him, someone who guarantees you a game in 29, I just think he's a perfect shout. And he's someone who can sort of chop and change between the back 3. As I said, Van Dijk, you probably wouldn't play in 28 and 29, so he's someone who you could throw in there. And I just think he just suits the structure and the way this team works really nicely. So yeah, Van der Ven is that final defender. So that is all of the defense. Let's get straight into the midfielders and let's talk about some players who are going to be in this wildcard draft, but also some players that I've left out. Okay, so the midfielders. Let's start off with the only person in this midfield who won't be available in 29, and that is Bukayo Saka. Now, I know there's probably going to be a lot of people umming and ahhing about whether to keep Saka or not. Most people would probably want to keep him this week as he's playing Sheffield United away. Arsenal have just been on a complete rampage at the moment. They're scoring 3, 4, 5 goals every game. He, without a doubt, he's on penalties. He's without a doubt a non-negotiable. He has to be in this team. And I know he doesn't play in 29, but like I said, this team is built so that you can afford to bench him. He's just so influential to everything Arsenal does. He's on, as I said, he's on penalties. He's on some corners as well, some free kicks. So he's just his player to point ratio is so good, and he offers so many avenues to those points. So I think Bukayo Saka, for me, one of the first names on the team sheets, especially in this midfielder group. He maybe is the first name despite not playing in 29. So Bukayo Saka, if you haven't got him, go and get him. I didn't have him last week, and it was horrible watching Arsenal play and watching Arsenal score goal after goal and knowing that I haven't got an Arsenal midfielder. So Bukayo Saka was my transfer that I made early at the start of this week. So yeah, if you haven't got him, go and get him. The other 4 of these midfielders are all playing in game week 29. So let's start off with the Spurs boys, and I've gone for Son and Richarlison. Now, this one was a tricky one for 2 reasons. First one being Maddison is still available. And And it was basically Son was almost a guarantee in this team. So let's just start with him first. The Son, for me, for the price you're paying for him, he's on penalties. He's going to play 90 minutes. Even if he starts on the left, usually by the end of the game, he ends up playing through the middle anyway. I just think he offers so much. And I think he's someone that maybe not everyone can get into just based on the way their team structure is set up. So he may be, I don't want to call him a differential because obviously he's still going to be owned by a fair few people, but he's someone which maybe people can't get to for this week. And this week they're playing Crystal Palace at home. So I do expect them to score. I expect it to be a closer game than what people may give Crystal Palace credit for, but I do expect him to hopefully be on the score sheet. I expect Spurs to put up at least 2. Now, the other problem with this was a choice between Richarlison and Maddison. So Richarlison has got the price. He's cheaper. I think he's 7.1 at the time of recording. And he also has the goal threat. Whereas Maddison has probably the minutes and he has a higher assist threat. This kind of depends on how you value an FPL asset. Do you value them for the minutes or do you value them for the prospect of them scoring? So I've gone for Richarlison on this, even though I know that there's a high chance that he plays 65, 70 minutes and gets pulled off. Even though last game he did play through, I know there's a chance that he's going to get subbed off. You know, Brennan Johnson's there, Timo Werner's there. I think Spurs have a fully fit attack. So there is a high chance that he is going to get pulled off. I do think he will be their starter, though. I think he'll be continuing to play up front. And to be honest with you, he was playing good before, like while someone to the Asia Cup. He was in form. He was consistent. He's not a player that I really rate, but in terms of FPL, I have to give him his credit because he was scoring goal after goal, game after game. And you know, when you've got someone like that who, you know, when they start up front, and Spurs will create chances just because of how attacking they are, I think it's probably worth investing in Richarlison over Maddison. I know Maddison has the minutes, obviously has the set pieces with him as well, but I just think Richarlison up front in that Spurs team, they will get him chances. It just depends on whether he can take them or not. But I think the money you're saving on him versus Maddison as well, I think is also another factor which could end up playing into this. Okay, so now a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. Jarrod Bowen, obviously, as you can see, is on screen. I would be lying to you if I said that I was considering him before the game that's just gone. So obviously he's just come off the back of a hat-trick against Brentford. West Ham finally putting together 4 goals. And I think the fact that Lucas Paqueta is back massively helps his upside. I think if it was just him and Kudus, to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't be looking at him. But just because of the creativity that Paqueta brings to the team, I think it makes Jarrod Bowen a viable option. So back at the start of the season, well, not start, I say probably like game week 10, I had both Paqueta and Bowen. And Bowen was one of those players that would just continually tick over for me. 6 points, 7 points, 8 points, 9 points. He would just continue ticking over. His away form is so good. Obviously, he's got Everton this week. I think the one thing I will say, though, is that if you are going to get Bowen, I would get him now because he plays Everton away this week. He then has Burnley in 28. Then obviously does play in 29, which is probably when most people will want to get him. But he has 2 very good fixtures prior to that game week 29 fixture. So I think for you to take full advantage of Jarrod Bowen, I think it's better to move early on him than wait until game week 29, where you'll see a lot of free hitters, a lot of wildcarders, a lot of people taking hits, and he will be one of the players that is most brought in that week solely because of what he offers West Ham and the fact he has a fixture. And finally, it is the hero of game week 26 for me, Mr. Douglas Luiz, the main man. I can't speak highly enough about this guy. 15-point haul. I think he's a no-brainer. And do you know what the funny thing with him is that he's been getting a lot of rap this season. Just because, like, everyone, you know, he's a penalty merchant, this, that, and the other. He is actually a very, very good player, especially when Aston Villa play at home and when he's at Villa Park. He's unbelievable. I think when Boubacar Kamara got injured, I think I said this in my last draft that I made last week, that I did wonder whether or not Douglas Luiz would end up playing a more defensive role. But from what I'm seeing, it's just John McGinn sitting in front of the back four, and Douglas Luiz has just been free roaming. He's been given the creativity just to move anywhere he wants to. He's obviously on penalties, which for a team like Aston Villa with Leon Bailey, Moussa Diaby, Watkins, there's always a high chance that they're going to get penalties. He's on corners, he's on free kicks. At 5.5 million, for me, it's a no-brainer. Maybe you could call him an enabler in some sense of the word. He possibly is, just due to his price. But I think, for me, I think he's just someone that has to be in there. You know, obviously Aston Villa have got good fixtures up until sort of 31, 32, when you probably would want to transition away from them. But for the time being, and they play in 29, I think it's a no-brainer, to be honest with you. One honourable mention in this list, though, who I haven't put in this team, but I think is more than a viable option if you wanted to go there, is Cole Palmer. So obviously Chelsea don't play in game week 29. They obviously got through past Leeds in the FA Cup, so they will have a blank. Cole Palmer from game week 30, I think, will just go back to being one of the best assets in FPL. His price, he's so cheap, and the fixes that Chelsea have are so good, and there is a very high chance, obviously, if they progress in the FA Cup, there's a very high chance that they end up with 2 doubles, maybe 34 and 37, or somewhere between that 30 and game week 38. So I think he's someone that you're going to want to have, which is why I kind of touched on the defense earlier. it wouldn't be the worst thing if you ended up getting a Chelsea defender as well. So for that sole reason, they've got good fixtures. There's a high chance that they end up with a few doubles. And yeah, he just hasn't made this list here. But if you want to trade him out for somebody else, I wouldn't be too mad at that because I think he's worth the money. Okay, so the forwards. This is where we all want to talk about. So I'm going to start with a player who's actually not on screen at the moment, and that is Dominic Solanke. So at the time of recording, he's actually flagged up on FPL. He's got a yellow flag, which is a 75% chance of him playing. It says a knee injury. My worry about this, though, is hearing the press conference from Bournemouth and that he's gone for a scan. Now, that could just be a precautionary thing just to make sure everything's okay. I personally don't believe he's going to play this week against Burnley, which is a shame because I think if you've moved early on Solanke, or you brought him in from last week in the anticipation that okay, Man City was a write-off, but they're going to play Burnley this week, I think you can feel very unlucky because I don't think anyone expected that. He's been fit all season. Dominic Solanke is one of those players that don't ever really get problems like that, and it's just a shame now. He's obviously had Burnley this week coming up, and then he's got a fantastic double against Luton and Sheffield. But like I said, when I hear the word scan being thrown around, it never fills me with joy. So just bearing in mind, just keep an eye on Solanke. I'm not saying that he can't get in here. Like if it comes out that he's all fit and he plays in game week 27 against Burnley, I think you swap him for Tony and then bring Tony back in game week 29. But what I would say is just hold tight and just see what the press conference says. But don't rush your transfers. Don't move early on players who maybe there's uncertainty around. Okay, so let's get on to the three strikers that we do have, and we're going to start in only one place, and that is Erling Haaland. I cannot believe that he scored 5 goals. Out of all the times to do it, he does it in an FA Cup game when a lot of us triple captained him, a few weeks back, and there was nothing there. And then now there's no FPL game. It's in the FA Cup. He goes and scores 5 goals. It's just typical. He is the best captain in FPL, and he will be my captain this week against Manchester United. I think Manchester United have got a lot of problems of their own. The defense isn't great. I think in the reverse fixture at the start of the season, I had him captain, and I think he came away with 2 goals and an assist. So Erling Haaland for me, whether you're wildcarding, whether you're not, you have to have him. There is definitely an argument to make after this week. Do we sell him for a couple of weeks? Obviously, he plays Liverpool in 28, blanks in 29. He has Brighton in 30, which isn't too bad, but then he plays Arsenal in 31. So I think there is definitely a question. It's something that I've been asking myself. Is there a 4-week period there that maybe you could move him out, drop the money down to Salah, and then try and find another way to bring him back later? That is definitely an option, and one which I will be considering after this game week's gone. But for this week, he is in my team. He's starting, and he will be my captain. Ivan Toney, let's talk about him. So I think before the Dominic Solanke injury came up, I think a lot of people were sort of 50-50 between Toney and Solanke as who's going to have that third striker spot. I think now with the Solanke injury, I think it probably helps people clear up their decision a lot easier, especially if they're wildcarding. Tony's just, he does what it says on the tin. He will get goals. He's on penalties. He's a bonus points magnet. He plays in 29. He has such an upside. And I think now that Solanke's injured, I think the front three, as you can see on screen, I think they kind of pick themselves. So yeah, Toney, for the prices, I think I can only see him rising as well, especially as we get closer to 29. I think you'll see a lot of people with free hits will have him for that week. He just offers a lot. He offers a lot. Brentford aren't in the best of form at the moment, but they are continuing to score goals, which means he will get chances. So yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with going for Toney this week. And finally, it's Ollie Watkins. Now, I touched on Aston Villa's fixtures earlier with Douglas Luiz, and I think there will be a point in the next sort of 4 or 5 weeks where we maybe look at shifting Ollie Watkins out. But that's not right now. Right now, Ollie Watkins is just a complete hold. If you haven't got him, go and get him because he has a game in 29 against Fulham, I believe it is. He's just in such good form. Aston Villa, even though I don't rate Aston Villa that much defensively, I think going forward, they'll always continue to create chances. Ollie Watkins will always get chances. So I think right now, with Salah being out, there's a lot of money around, so you can afford this front three. As I said, it's going to depend on your team value and kind of how much money you have personally. And I don't like giving them answers because I don't like giving this. It's a team dependent answer, but in this case, it is true. Some of you may not be able to afford that front three. As I said, for me, I had 0.1 million left in the bank after creating this team. So yeah, it really is dependent on your situation and your team value. But I think if you can afford Ollie Watkins, you just have to get him in. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching this video today. If you have enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below. I'm going to be back tomorrow with a final thoughts / final team selection video. So what we'll do is we'll go into some key questions that are being asked. We'll look at some last minute decisions on certain assets. We'll talk about Dominic Solanke, whether we feel he's going to be fit. I'll show you guys my team as well. Obviously, at the time of recording, Hwang's flagged up with an injury as well, so it's not looking great. There is a chance that I take a -4, possibly a -8, but we're going to cover all of that tomorrow. And any questions that you guys have, feel free to drop it in the comments down below, and I will try and get back to all of them in the video tomorrow. But thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, if you have enjoyed it, like I said, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below. And I'll catch you guys tomorrow.